Hotel workers of Reddit. What's the strangest, most disgusting thing you've ever seen happen? Story 1. 3 young girls shared a room, were wasted. Next morning, they were very quick to check out, not even went for breakfast. Turns out they took dumps all over the room. We blacklisted them and sent their IDs to other hotels telling of what happened, so they could be aware if they showed up. At least we could take the money for the stay of the credit card they gave. Story 2. When I was just out of high school, I worked as a housekeeper at a decently upscale hotel. The main policy regarding cleaning rooms was unless it was a legal activity, just clean around it. Okay, fair, I had seen marijuana paraphernalia in hotel rooms and chosen to just ignore it. Guns laying around in their lock cases during a gun convention. Fair enough, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw on a night room turndown. Basically, you lightly freshen up the room, make the bed prepare to be used for the night, and drop a chocolate on the pillow. When I moved the sheet down to make the tuck for turndown, there was child pictures. I immediately spoke to the night manager, who contacted the police. I was allowed to anonymously make a report because the man was already on probation. He wasn't allowed to even be staying at the hotel. He was from the area and utilized hotels to meet other pedophiles. Because it was probation, they could be more flexible with warrants and such. Still bothers me now. Edit, sorry, I didn't want to take over this post and be a Debbie Downer. Also, it wasn't a thought about reporting it. It is just what we do as people for each other. His victims who had to report in court, and many others are the ones I look up to because I cannot comprehend their pain. Thanks you, Bubba Chanel, for the gold. Honestly, this wasn't something I had thought about in quite some time, so thanks for the Reddit therapy. I could do it anonymously, and I like that about Reddit. Story 3. Obligatory, not a hotel worker, but just a keen traveler wanted to break up the feces stories. Stayed in a resort where it was a series of clay huts that comprised a hotel. This was in Namibia. You booked a hut. Chill and go about your life. When I arrived, I found the door to my hut with scratches on the outside and several bolts. A sign saying, "Do not open at night." Strange, I didn't sleep that night as I could hear a child wailing outside in pain and scrabbling at the door. Once I heard the door trying to be wrenched open. Next morning, I spoke to the other guests who had had a similar experience. Turns out that it was monkeys that mimicked human sounds to make people open the door and attack them. Stranger than fiction. Edit grammar. Story 4. A guy shot himself in the hotel room, and the maids found him. It was a chain hotel which sent their laundry to the hotel I worked for, and days later we received the bedsheet from said room, obviously covered in blood, and my boss just said it was just blood. We won't throw away sheets just because of a bit blood. Little did she know that I threw them away behind her back. Story 5. I don't work for a hotel, but for a hotel reservations website. Once got a call from a client who was staying in Thailand, asking to be relocated. When we asked why would he need that, he told us the police was there, because the property owner, it was a villa, not a hotel, had murdered her husband and buried him under the villa. When he called us, they were there with an excavator and a coroner's crew. On top of that, the villa owner ran away with the client's passports, so they also required consular assistance. Story 6. Worked in a shitty pub that offered shitty accommodation. A guest rightfully lost there after they climbed in a bed and found a soiled pair of men's underwear. They fired the housekeeper after that. Story 7. A guy calling 5 elite prostitutes in a single night in a very expensive room. He consumed a lot of whiskey, and after him there were cocaine traces in the room. He left me a very decent tip. At some point, around 3 to 4 a.m., another guy, super drunk, arrived at the reception and told me to look after his friend. You know, he's a cool guy, got a family and everything, but sometimes we just need to relax that way. Story 8. Worked at a large hotel. Every year, a group of old men rented the top 2 floors of the hotel for a few days. These were all retired judges, lawyers, business owners, ECT. They would wear thousands of dollars of jewelry, bring in tons of liquor and other stuff. They would hire a bunch of prostitutes, put them in rooms, and post a paper on the door with the description of the prostitute in each room. Basically would have a huge party in every aspect, would have to tell them to stay on their floors, but would have old naked guys be spotted in the elevator or on other floors freaking out other guests. They were big tippers and made for an interesting weekend each year. Edit for typo. Edit 2. Now that you all guessed it, it was the Royal Order of Jesters. I remember their purple, and like I said, all the crazy jewelry they had. Pretty crazy. I can't imagine the amount bill to allow it, and turn a blind eye. Story 9. I was a night auditor 10 years ago in an airport hotel. We had a pilot staying in our hotel. His name was Trevor. Trevor got drunk and locked himself out of the room, just wearing a very tiny piece of underwear. He used the phone of the corridor to call us open his room. Could happen, right? This repeated itself for 3 times. So after the 3rd time, we told him that we would not run up to open his room anymore. So after half an hour, he came downstairs saying he locked himself out of the room again and that he would spend the night in the lobby. After he fell asleep in the lobby, we decided to carry him to his room. and we literally put him in bed. This time he stayed there, no idea why he would lock himself out all the time, no idea why he didn't wear any more clothing, I guess drunk, but he was annoying. Story 10, I used to work as a quality supervisor for a 5-hotel. Basically, my job was to make sure that both the staff and the guests have no ongoing issues. One morning, I was around the reception area. Guests were leaving in masses. I asked a few of them about their stay, took positive and negative feedback. Suddenly, one of the receptionist girls waved me over. A guest couple was checking out. I think they were Irish, age around 24, 26. Completely normal couple. The receptionist girl pulled me over and said that one of the cleaning crew notified them to send me up to the couple's room immediately. A bit puzzled, I go up to their room. It was trashed. Like completely trashed, like if there were some blood splatters around. It could have seriously looked like a scene for a brutal murder case, among 100 other things. Broken chair, broken TV, pillows and sheets all over the place, curtains torn down, the bathtub was clogged with the bathrobes, and the floor was completely drenched. The table seems like some sort of makeup and other unknown things were used to paint all over it. A pack of wet Asian noodles were slammed on the ceiling, a tampon inside a lamp, and so on. Completely in shock, I went down to immediately talk to the couple. I questioned them, but they acted like they don't know what I'm talking about. Called them the higher-ups. In the end, they were forced to pay a considerable amount of money for the damage they caused. The strangest thing was they were genuinely acting like they don't know what happened at all, not just trying to lie or make up a ridiculous story. After they paid, still acting like they did nothing wrong, and left, I went on to investigate the issue a bit more. I ran into some of the other guests from the floor they stayed in and asked them if they saw or heard anything strange. As it turned out, the couple acted like they were on drugs the night before the accident, like heavy drugs. They stood in the hallway for 30 minutes, just staring at the wall. For example, they left claw marks on the inside of the door, which I didn't even notice at first. The staff did not get called because other people thought they were just moderately drunk tourists. To this day, I do not know what drug they took, but that room left a permanent mental image in my head. Story 11. Eve worked in a fair few of London's most famous hotels as a gardener, and have some weird stories about people there. Barbara Streisand always made weird requests. For example, she demanded a fresh roll of turf every day be delivered to her room, so her dog could on it. I also found a huge log of inside and interior palm too. It was literally tucked into the crown of the plant like a vigilant guard. No idea why someone would feel the need to do that, but hey, people are weird. Story 12, this happened last week. Saw a really drunk Korean guy inspecting a coconut tree. Apparently he decided he really wanted to climb a coconut tree at 1 a.m. I didn't see him fall, just heard the thud. Nothing serious happened to him. He got the wind knocked out of him and passed out. The security guards tried to help, but they got bitched out by his equally drunk girlfriend. She sobbed over him for a while then. I think she went to sleep on him. Saw them both at breakfast though. Just strange, but whatever. You want to pay $200 to sleep outdoors, be my guest. Story 13, I was running room service up to a room one evening. They placed the order half an hour before and knew the wait time. So normally people were half ready for the knock at the door. Got to this woman's room, and all I can hear is giggling and whispering. Eventually she opens the door a crack, and I tell her that her food's arrived. She shut the door again, and more giggling, then opens it slightly wider. I tell her I need to come in to put the tray down, and for her to sign for the food, and same again, giggling, door closed. She then opens it wearing a towel. Get in the room. She signs, and that's when I see it. A naked man in a chair in the corner, casually covering a very erect penis with a single page from a newspaper. Like this guy had over 2 minutes to change, hide, cover up, and instead just opted for the front page of the Times. Story 14, not a hotel worker, but I did do a short stint as a room checker for my university during the summer break. Basically, it was going into student halls' rooms and checking for damages, anything left behind, and generally making a laundry list of how much of your deposit are we taking from you kind of stuff, as well as setting up the rooms for new students coming in. The worst by far was a dorm room that was very neat and tidy on the face of it. But when you open the door to the en-suite bathroom, well, it's tough to describe, but the entire shower and walls around it were caked in wet hair. And I mean caked, you literally couldn't see the walls in some places. The whole place smelled like rancid wet dog and pretty much made me vomit instantly. Unfortunately, the nearest toilet was right there in front of me, so I kind of got stuck in a vomit loop before I eventually made it out of there. We have no clue what happened in that room. There had to be some sort of animal involved because there was no way that much hair came off one human being, even the hairiest of us. But even if he was washing a dog or whatever in there was no way this could have happened accidentally or just being too lazy to clean. It was just far too, well, everywhere. Even if we were to assume that Husha cleaned his dog in the shower every day for the year he spent there, it still didn't seem like it would be enough to cause that much on the walls. I learned later that this room in particular was deemed not fit to be used for the next wave of students. since during our second round, where we put all the new student into every room, we were told to skip it. I was very pleased about that. While I'm here, though, a weird thing we found was just what people were willing to leave behind after they left the halls. We found laptops, boxes, designer watches, jewelry, whole cabinets of clothes. Some people legitimately just didn't pack their stuff at all and just off. Sometimes you couldn't even tell some rooms had been vacated at all by the way they looked, and we actually had to get confirmation a few times that people had actually left. It was put down to the richer foreign students who didn't care that they'd lose their deposit or could easily replace all the stuff they'd left when they got back home. Not massively crazy compared to the stuff that will eventually grace this thread, but just thought it worth mentioning. Story 15, not from me, but my sister works in the hotel biz, and a colleague of hers told her about a time when a man checked in and wouldn't let anyone go into the room for over a week. They were all suspicious of what he must be doing as the corridor outside the room started to smell really bad. One day, he went out, so the staff snuck in to see what was going on. I bet they wish they hadn't. He had dead fish hung up all around the room, and they had condoms inside, starting from the mouth going into the body of the fish. So I think you can guess what he'd been up to. I'm not sure what happened, but I've never heard anything like it. Story 16, not a hotel worker, but checked into a hotel in Covent Garden, London a few years ago. We're next in line and just about to walk up to the desk, and this woman very passive-aggressively tells the receptionist that there are two naked men in her room. She got a new room. Story 17, we were a small pet friend's hotel in a medium-sized NC town. There was a guest in town for a few months that was covering for someone at one of the local plants. This guy was traveling with his dog and generally seemed like a pretty alright guy, even if he was a recluse. This guy said we didn't need to go in his room for housekeeping since his dog wasn't the friendliest and he liked to do the cleaning himself. This isn't really an abnormal request, and we never had trouble with people doing that in the past, so we were happy enough to save our girls a room on the housekeeping boards. After 2 months, the guy checks out, and we go into the room for the first time in that span. What we found was a smorgasbord of disgusting. Opening the door, we were assailed by the overpowering stench of dog urine. Okay, that happens sometimes. Taking the first step into the room, our shoes are greeted with a squish and literal dog urine coming up over the top of our shoes. This was obviously worse than we thought it would be. Exploring the room further, we found that the mattress and chair were completely soaked through with dog urine and growing literal mushrooms and mold. Beyond the tables and dressers was split and peeling beyond any kind of salvage. The bathroom had stains on the floor and in the tub, but the tub also had a temporary bed of blankets and pillows set up in it. This dude was literally coming back to his room every day and sleeping in that mess. The only thing he bothered to clean up was the dogs mostly. This was for 2 months. We had to completely strip the room and rehab it because it was so bad. This also prompted us to create a policy where we had to enter every room at least once a week. No exceptions. It amazes me that guy slept in there and supposedly went to work each day. I don't know how he managed to hold down a job if he lived like that. Story 18, we had a girl staying for a week in our place. She would call my office phone a few times a day for our janitor kid to get her snacks from the vending machines and take her cash to pay for her room. Her reason was that she had very bad leg pain and it was hard to walk. Hospitality is our business, so no one complained. When the kid went to the room, she was always seated in a wheelchair with a blanket draped over her from the waist down. At the end of the week, she called me crying that she couldn't take the pain anymore. Would I call for an ambulance? When the EMT arrived and pulled the blanket away, they found out the awful truth. This young girl was a nursing student and had used her stolen instruments to cut off her leg mid-thigh. She did it in the tub and washed the blood down the drain. She had gotten through the bone and had been working on the underside flesh. It goes without saying she had some kind of mental issues. She was admitted to the hospital where they worked to reattach her leg and then sent to the psych ward. When her family was notified, according to the nurses at the hospital, friends of mine, they did not come. I often think of this girl and wonder what became of her. Story 19, I'm not a hotel worker, but this is relevant, I promise. I am a police officer and got a call to a hotel where a woman wouldn't leave her room after checkout. Got staff to unlock the door. The woman was sitting naked on the bed and had shat everywhere. It was even on the ceiling. There were skid marks on the floor where Shed slipped in it. There were about 5 empty wine bottles, so I guess Shed drank so much her bowels just said this, I'm done. As I opened the door, she slowly slid sideways, landing her face on the pillow, also covered in, so that was special. Story 20, after high school, I worked in a hotel on Miami Beach. I was young, fresh out of high school. I was a bellhop in the hotel down there on 80. We got a call to move a guest out of his room. I went up to the room, knocked on the door, and when I opened it, the guest had spray painted the entire room gold. He said it was 24 karat gold because he stayed in hotels in Saudi Arabia that were solid gold. So he wanted to make his room look like that. He spray painted the bed sheets, light bulbs, bathroom, everything in that room was gold. They moved him into a hotel down the beach and didn't tell them. Story 21, when I was in university back in 2010, it was a bit harder to get a job. So I ended up working as a housekeeper at a chain hotel for a couple of months. Anyway, it's about mid-morning, and I'm cleaning away when one of the lads I work with knocked on the door and said he had a question for me. When I asked what's up, he said he couldn't explain. He was Indian but spoke really good English. So I was a bit confused. He told me to follow him to the room he was cleaning so he could show me. I walked into the room he'd been in, and there was a really weird smell. Then I noticed it. Used tampons everywhere. I mean everywhere. Stuck to the ceiling, the walls, the TV, all over the floor. I noped the out of there and told him to ring the managers. We didn't get paid enough to deal with that. Edit ID, just like to add, when I worked this job, I was working with a lot of Indian and Eastern European ladies and gents, and they're some of the hardest working people out there considering the money on offer. Story 22, a couple checked in, left the room destroyed, Henny bottles, Jack bottles, weed, mattress was flipped and torn, sheets had a blood mix on them. Took us forever to get the room in order. Story 23, this guy brought a middle-aged hooker with him, couldn't do anything as she was included in the reservation, and they were making a lot of noise at 2 a.m., and I received a noise complaint. I want to talk to them. Both were outside the room, only wearing a towel, and both casually opened their towels to readjust them when I was talking to them. Story 24, not a hotel worker, but I was staying in a central London budget hotel one Sunday evening whilst working away. The poor receptionist was extremely busy dealing with complaints as I was waiting to check in. Felt sorry for the poor guy. I got my key and headed up to the room after a busy day, traveling, working. Got to my room to find something wasn't quite right. The bed wasn't made. I was like, okay, no problem, I will make it. Turn the light on to find condoms everywhere. I mean everywhere, like must have been nearly 30 of them. All used in the bed, on the floor, in the sink, toilet, kettle. I went back downstairs and explained the deal to the poor, stressed receptionist. Got a new room. Also, staying at a hotel last year. Took a bath. Next minute, the phone is ringing. Apparently, bath water is leaking from my room into the reception downstairs. Free upgrade to the new renovated bridal suite for me. Story 25, in our Carvery dinner room, Sunday roast dinner restaurant setup. Woman changed her baby's poopy nappy on the white tablecloths and left it there for me to clean up, then complained that I didn't clear her dinner dishes promptly enough for dessert. I went on break and pieced the out of there. Also, in a separate day, in the same part of the hotel, a guy died after his dinner and sat dead with families coming through for their Sunday dinner with a dead guy in a restaurant for a good 30 minutes before we realized. Me and most of the workers were 16 years old and hadn't a clue. Story 26, I am a night auditor at a hotel. The strangest is the caller who calls between 4 a.m., asks to reserve a room, then talks about masturbating and some other very inappropriate things. You can hear him jerking in the background. I have told management about this, and they still have yet to block his number. The grossest thing I have witnessed was a woman in our business center who was picking at her crotch, legs, and feet, and proceeded to eat whatever she had picked off. I thought she was masturbating at first, but she was absolutely not. She did this for over 3 hours. I told housekeeping to sanitize that room. Story 27, I worked at a hotel that had ice machines on each floor. Our ice machines were not the type where you push a button to release the ice. Instead, you open up the bin and scoop the ice out every month or so. Maintenance would remove all the ice and thoroughly clean the bins. One month, we found a used condom in the bin. Story 28, I used to do night audit at an old historical hotel downtown for a few months. It was an old plantation house that was restored and repurposed to be this really cute tiny hotel. We only had about 20 to 30 rooms. Apparently, it's haunted by the old mistress who used to own the house. There's this huge mural in the lobby of her, and her bedroom is located right above the lobby. Her bedroom is actually the most expensive room in the hotel because of its size and because you get the fun of staying in the haunted room. They actually advertise how haunted they are. You'd think I'd be scared working overnight all by myself, but it honestly didn't bother me too much. Nothing malevolent had ever happened to me. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps from a room when I knew nobody was in there. Doors to vacant rooms would be unlocked or opened, or the radio would change channels on its own. The most that's ever happened was the chandelier swinging wildly in the lobby. But that only really happened when someone stayed at her room. Weddings especially would rile her up. I love to chat with her, though. Nobody else was awake when I was, and it made me feel a little less lonely. Sometimes when I felt like I was being watched, I'd just talk to her like, hey girl, you lonely tonight? Or, yes, someone's in your room tonight, sorry. I often said hello to her portrait when I started my shifts, too. I like to think that we kept each other company during the graveyard shift, haha. Apparently, not everyone has had good experiences with her, though. I've heard that some employees have quit because of incidents or because they were too creeped out to work there. I guess she liked me because I tried to be respectful and make conversation with her during my nights up there. It was the weirdest place I've ever worked, LMAO. Story 29, I heard this one in a podcast once, and it's my favorite story. A guy called a travel agency wanting a refund because this happened. He was getting physical with his girlfriend and wanted role play. He put Rod Stewart's "Do You Think I'm Sexy?" on his phone on replay. Then he ties the girlfriend tight on the bed. He then changes into a crotchless Spider-Man costume. He then stands on the counter and falls off and breaks his leg and is immobile in the corner. So now the guy can't get up, the girl can't get up. And so, You Think I'm Sexy is playing on repeat for like an hour. Funniest story I ever heard. Story 30, not a hotel worker, but a hotel story. Guy I knew was a BMX stunt rider and would travel with his buddies to different parts of the country to ride. One guy in the crew was obsessed with. He would take a dump in a Pringles can and walk around offering to people who thought nothing of it until they pulled their fingers out covered in his. As the story goes, he comes out of the hotel bathroom with a plate of his, says he'll be right back, comes back to the room without the plate, and tells everyone he's ready to go. The group figured he left it in front of someone's room or on the concierge counter, whatever it was. They go on riding. They come back hours later to a lobby full of people complaining and yelling at the staff. The stench hits them the minute they walk in. Turns out he put the plate in the microwave used by the guests for a few hours. The staff brought in fans and air fresheners to rid the smell as best as they could. Story 31, I work front desk at a hotel. I wasn't there for this, but heard it through a coworker. An older man, about 40s or 50s, apparently needed to use the bathrooms very badly and didn't have time to make it back to his room or even to the lobby bathroom. So what does he do? He finds a nearest housekeeping closet that's open, then proceeds to squat and in a random bucket. The worst part, one of the housekeepers was in the closet getting linens. Story 32, I have a few. 1. A co-worker forgot to lock up the pool, and 2 elderly guests snuck in and had violent in the pool. I didn't see the tape, but apparently it was so bad that my supervisor had to stress how violent it was. Pool was shut down for a week. 2. I watched a man take off his clothes and pee off a second-story balcony onto some women. I assume he was drunk. 3. The hotel was attached to a bus station. I really had to go, so I decided to use the bus station bathroom. After I was done, I heard the door open behind me, and a full naked woman walked out. Of course, I thought I was about to be murdered, but my job was so terrible that I had long since stopped giving a so. I just said, "Hey." She smiled and said, "I'm just doing my makeup," and then sat down, cross-legged and fully naked, on a bus station bathroom floor. Mind you, I had seen women pull out tampons and throw them onto the floor, and women, drunk off there, puke onto this floor. I had seen women who just did not care about anything else on this floor. I hit a retch and went to leave, but then the woman said, "Oh, come on." Turn around to see a bunch of needles on the floor. The woman was shaking a lighter. I hightailed it out of there. I told security, but the woman stayed in the bathroom for at least 3 hours. Security couldn't go in lack of female guards, maybe. And also because I guess they didn't want to be stabbed by a naked junkie. She was in there a good 3 hours. I think Forguest purposefully made himself throw up to get away from security. He did not get away from security. Security attempts to remove drunk and angry guest. Guest agrees to leave, sticks his fingers down his throat, pukes, and tries to run. Didn't get very far. I hated that place. Story 33, had a guy wander into our employees' only kitchen completely naked. I sent him back to his room. He gets on the elevator, and I think that's the end of it until I have to use the elevator a minute or two later. He's just standing there, so at that point I call the police to help sort it out. Story 34, I used to work in a restaurant attached to a hotel and would be responsible for room service calls. There was the one older guy who was staying alone, visiting his wife in a hospital as she was dealing with a sudden and terminal cancer diagnosis. At first it was fine. He would just order dinner and a bottle of wine every night. Then it became 2 bottles of wine, then 3, spaced throughout the day. His wife passed, and then it became 4. The hotel staff was starting to get worried, but he wasn't really breaking any rules. He would just stay in his room all day eating and drinking. Until one time I went to deliver his daily dinner. He didn't even call in orders anymore. He got the same thing every day, and he didn't answer the door. I thought I heard a cry from inside, like a pain groan or something, so I put the food down and went to tell the front desk. They said they'd handle it. I later found out he tried to get out of bed and just collapsed after drinking himself into a stupor. He had been there for hours and was laying in his own filth. They kicked him out after that. And ended his 3-month stay. I felt really bad for the man. He was going through heartbreak and was struggling to cope. Story 35, current night auditor. I was working in a hotel in Montana during the winter a few years back. Had a pretty bad blizzard one night, -30s in temp, and I found footprints in the snow outside during a walk. They led me to a naked man who had busted into our housekeeping room. I quickly contacted police who happened to be around the block. Found out the next day that he had broken into someone's garage and been, enjoying some choice magazines before the owner of the house's garage caught him and chased him out where he ran to the hotel. Story 36. Former hotel receptionist here. Two teenage girls shared a room, bridesmaids, and a wedding party. On checkout, they had literally shat everywhere. On the walls, chairs, door, to bathroom, vomit too, but mostly poo. They had obviously been drinking the night before, but my God. Still don't get how you just wake up, leave a room covered in, and think, righto, time to get going, and just check out like everything's normal. Story 37. Not C. But I could smell something weird that I had never smelled before. It filled an entire floor of the hotel. Turns out it was smoke, but not pot smoke. I still don't know what it was, but all I know is it definitely wasn't pot. Also, I want to get on the elevator, and the doors open to reveal this scary-looking guy in handcuffs with two guards at either side. The hotel I worked in was, not in a good part of town. Story 38, not my story, but a colleague's Asian man came to reception complaining that the microwave didn't work. We didn't have microwaves in the room. He tried to microwave a pizza in the safe. Story 39, I used to work in room service and saw a lot of weird stuff. I've been asked to pour ice buckets over naked prostitutes in a bathtub. These were VIP return guests. Somebody also asked me to deliver a banana, olive oil, and cream to their room. Once I was working New Year's Eve, and a lady shut the door behind me when checking her minibar fridge, closed her eyes, and started having premonitions about me meeting my husband in the next year. It was super strange, however, I was too polite to leave. Met my husband exactly a year later on New Year's Eve at the hotel. Story 40. This will very likely be buried. But I was working on the reception one shift, and all of a sudden this guest comes down with his laptop, passport, about $2,000 in cash, and asked me to put it into the hotel safe, like the safe in the office where the money and everything is kept. There weren't any safes in the rooms because it was a budget hotel. It wasn't that weird, but the way he did it was weird. He had this kind of off aura about him. I couldn't put my finger on why, though. All is fine and dandy until a few hours went by. I was still on the front desk when a policeman walked in the doors and tried to go up in the lift, which required a key card, so I had to swipe him up. He never said anything. I was confused and caught off guard, so I didn't ask him what was going on. Turns out, the guy who asked us to put his stuff in the safe was a pedophile who turned himself into the police while surrounded by rooms of families with kids. There were so many kids, he never did anything, kept to himself, and I'm incredibly glad that he gave himself up over anything else, but it was just bizarre. The police took all of his stuff with them, and we didn't hear about it again. Hands down the weirdest shift I ever worked. Story 41. Worked for a Hilton in college, and we had a man get so faced off of tequila in the bar that while walking to the elevator, he pissed in a trail up to the elevator and apparently again on the way to his room. The lobby, elevator, and fifth floor were roped off for quite some time due to no housekeeping after 7 p.m. Story 42. I worked in a hotel for about 2 years and saw so many disturbing and odd things. One of the worst, a man was staying in a room by himself during the week on business. He was well dressed, very polite, typical businessman. He checked out, and the housekeepers went to work. Nothing unusual from the room until she got to the shower. She sprayed and wiped it down and turned on the shower to get the excess cleaning solution. Then she noticed it wasn't draining. Our tubs all had the stoppers that you push to close, push to open. She pushed it to see if it was just closed, pushed it back up to open, and up came. She continually had to push the stopper up and back, getting little bits of here and there, and then got the handyman to take the stopper completely out. It took hours to clean the pipes of all of the man shoved down the drain. It was disgusting, but also impressive that he did such a good job getting it all into the drain that she didn't notice until the tub wouldn't drain. Story 43. 3 agents were on shift this night, and the evening was going like any other. However, this night we get an alert from our fireboard panel that a smoke detector was going off in one of the rooms. An agent called up to the room to see if everything was okay. No one answered the phone. With the alarm blaring, it was odd that someone could just sleep through it. After a few more failed attempts to reach the guest, myself and another agent headed up to the room. When the elevator opened onto the floor, you could hear the alarm still going off in the room. My coworker knocked again. With no response, he said, "Hello, I am coming in. I'm leaning against the wall, so I can't see in." He creaks open the door slowly, then shuts it abruptly, turns to me, and says there's a dead man in there. Thinking he must be joking, I open up the door myself quickly, and there on the carpet floor is an older man lying naked, lifeless. The next thing to catch my attention is that there is so much thick steam hovering over the room, coming from the shower. I run into the bathroom, reach my arm into the shower, and turn off the steaming hot water. I turn around and see needles filled with a brown substance lying all over the bathroom counter, towels with blood covered on them, and a massive, and I mean massive, my coworker during this time had gone to check on the man and call 911. I walk back into the main part of the room and see my coworker on the phone with 911, the man lying there. Outside, I met the paramedics, explained the situation, and lead them up to the room. Once back in the room, the man showed signs of life. They carried him out on the stretcher. After we looked up his guest profile, and I noticed he was a frequent guest and always requested a walk and shower. We pieced things together and assumed he liked to come to the hotel to shoot up Harry and take a really hot shower and shove massive dildos up his butt.